the beginning. I'd like to hear from that person, and then when he's through, I would ask for a raise of hands and those that are supporting that comment made, and then after that person gets up, I would give each one of you that still want to come up and voice your opinion a minute to 2 minutes. The reason being is I don't want to have to be here till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I don't think any of you do either. You want to be heard and you want that to come across. So with that being said, I'm going to open this up for public comment at this time. Could you come up and state your name, sir?
Banked Johnson.
Banked?
Like you banked the basketball. County resident. Happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. Just while it's fresh on our minds, when we talk about the 63 megawatt load, that's for and the height of the poles. Those heights are federally regulated, and one thing that we've probably not talked enough in depth is those poles are a dual line system, meaning that it'll have Rocky Mountain Heber Light and Power's line and an additional line for Rocky Mountain Power. So the 63 megawatt load will be ×2 in capability on that line as it moves west through the valley. I wanted to talk briefly. There's 2 of us actually that are here to speak. We've divvied up the topics and we wanted to talk about between 2 people. Number 1, I have 2. Number 1 is the petition that you received. I was told that you would get a copy of it. And I just want to characterize that petition. That is signed by concerned people that live in the county that are concerned with the feeling that they had when they saw phase 1 pop up along the 40. And now that the details and the contract and now a conditional use permit has been filed and the details are starting to come to light, they are highly concerned. And so this is a group of people that are, it's indiscriminate, it's whoever passively comes to this petition through our website, which was voltcitizens.org. And again, it's passive. We haven't done much to actively get signatures, but we expect that effort to happen in the future. Since you received your packet, there's an addendum that I have with an additional 800 signatures, taking the total amount over 1,750 concerned citizens in the valley. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was the requirements of the conditional use permit. As I see through the requirements, the easements have to be demonstrated. It's very clear, and we've seen no recorded evidence of the appropriate easements that pertain to the project. And we feel that it's akin to putting the cart before the horse. Also, any prescriptive easements that may exist cannot really be expanded past what is expressly stated in the documents creating the easement, or beyond the use that established the easement in the beginning. It wouldn't be permissible to expand a narrow access driveway, for example, into a 4-lane road if that was not anticipated when the easement was created. So, also, the Office of Property Rights Ombudsman under the Utah Department of Commerce states the same, basically what we just said. That was a quote from them. So, we also believe that property owners who may have granted rights in the past or who have prescriptively had those rights imposed or those easements imposed on them had no idea of the change of the scope, the character, the mass, the height, the voltage of what's being proposed. We're also concerned that the project hinges on the expansion of any of these easements. And furthermore, if these prescriptive easements exist for Heber Light and Power, we're concerned of a conveyance to a third party, to to Rocky Mountain, that was never included in the initiation of these easements in the beginning. And for that, we as citizens have come forth to ask us to pause this project, to rethink it, reroute it, or to bury it. And we're happy to look and to vote, and we're happy to put any input as a community towards this project. Thank you.
Do you have any
Questions?
figures on what it would take to bury it? Have you done any research or?
I am not an engineer, so what I have done is through my research and through other engineering firms who I've talked to personally, and anywhere from the 3 to 4.7 range is kind of the range that they've been talking about.
3 to 4.7 what? Dollars per mile?
X.
Oh,
X.
Okay.
And so, when we talk that it's too expensive, we would be open to seeing and listening to those explorations that have been told to us that they have been done, but we've found that sadly that they haven't been done from the board. So, does that answer that question?
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any dialogue?
In a minute. What, does the other commissioners have questions?
Yeah, good.
For Diane?
Hank, on your, I see the names down here, which is great. You see you got the signatures. Is it just people emailing you that they're concerned, or do you have signatures from these people? Tell me a little bit about
the way the process works is we've engaged in the online petition system, and someone will go on there, they'll put their name, they can opt in with an email. So we probably have 75% of those names with emails and contact information.
So I'm just trying to figure out in 9 days, which is great.
Yeah.
But did you send a mass email out?
So
to
we
every
utilized,
person so they just could check yes or no, and
No.
that's how you got it? I'm trying to figure out.
the way the process would work is we originally posted on Facebook in the Ask Heber and Ask Midway forums of Facebook. These are forums that people have to request admission to, and the forum administrators have to accept that request. So it's not something that can just happen quickly, and you can't overload the system with buses of people from out of town. It's people who want to be on that forum. Now, granted, you could argue, I guess, that we need to go through and verify these, but within 9 days and within notice of this conditional use permit, we've done our very best. And I think that it's obvious that the city of Heber, Charleston, Midway, and Kingston, and their citizenry are very interested and concerned about this project.
Go ahead.
Just a question. I assume nobody in the room wants to suffer through rolling blackouts.
Right.
So what alternative have you thought of besides horribly expensive project as well as difficult project to put it underground?
Well, that's a good question. And again, I'm not an engineer, but at a first brush glance, again, our title of our petition is to rethink this. We talk about a north line that's now coming in at 63 megawatts. They say they have 29 megawatts of capability through through the other line from Midway. So in my mind, that's over 80 megawatts when our demand, I think they said it was 40 something.
45.
45 at some point.
But going up.
Right, but going up. So number one, I think we're within our capacity if we ran both the new north point of of Energy Point and the south. That's just me. I'm a photographer. I'm not an engineer. Number two, rerouting. We talked about this, and I just thought about this here in this meeting, this parallel line, this old line. Well, why can't we run another line down a parallel line and have two from the north, for instance? Or why don't we route around the perimeter of our valley instead of right through the middle? It seems like we're kind of giving up, for lack of a better term, the valley's birthright by running it right down through the middle. So that's just one option, and then burying it. Burying is an option that is gaining momentum. Jackson Hole has just now decided to bury multiple miles of their transmission lines to protect it from wind and from other elements that can take down lines and cause blackouts.
Have you found out the cost of that up there? Or
I haven't.
Pursued that?
No. But again, part of the pausing and rethinking charge is to ask for Heber Light and Power and Rocky Mountain to do some studies of of efficacy and availability to the valley.
Okay, any other questions for Hank? You said you had one other?
There's another
Oh,
speaker.
you have another speaker.
Yeah.
Yep. Could he come up and state his name? Thanks, Hank. Sorry about that.
Can I ask something while he's coming up?
In a minute.
Is,
Evening,
Good evening.
Chris Clayson, Valley resident.
Places.
Clayson,
that's what I was
CLA.
gonna ask.
SON. Thanks for the opportunity to make a few comments. Mr. Giles, am I on the 1 to 2 minute clock, or
We'll let you
can I be
have a few
reasonably
minutes.
more extensive than?
I will give you the cutoff if you get going too far. Go ahead.
You know, I'd start with, so starting this meeting with a prayer, being able to salute the flag, even though I don't take lightly, and I genuinely appreciate the opportunity that we have as citizens, as community residents, to engage with you and to be listened to. And I've never done this before. And so I appreciate so far the tone tonight. And I feel like those who have stood at this podium have been listened to and asked reasonable questions. So I don't take that for granted, and I appreciate that. I think first make a couple of comments about the petition. The petition from a concerned group of citizens isn't to represent some legal or procedural responsibility. But I think, at least from my perspective, and I don't pretend to speak for everybody here by any stretch, but I've heard a lot over the past 4 to 6 weeks. But I think more to generate, at least in your minds, relative to this specific petition, that this is a project that has evidently, but first of all, it's been described as on the books or under consideration for decades in a number of forums, private and public. I think tonight we can clearly establish, from my perspective, would be from the petition that you have, that this particular project, cast this way, has been in serious discussion between Rocky Mountain Power and Hero Electric Power the most since 2014. So my first perspective, I've asked you to consider, when I think about upgrades, I want a better hotel room, or I want, maybe a seat by the window on an airplane. And so the characterization of just, we're kind of upgrading what's already there, we've got to do line maintenance, I think is a misperception. When you go stand under one of these, so I live by one of the existing poles in Midway. I bought property, and there's a pole there. I didn't like the pole, right? But my family and I talk about the pole, and we reasonably say, I can, at that price, for that land, I can accept that pole. That's fine. Remember, this project is since 2014 under discussion. So to put two pieces of property together that I purchased and to build a home on it, we have had a home here for about 10 years, and we're building another one in Newton. I spent the better part of a year with a very detailed engineering study, right? Putting those plans together, personally notified everybody within a certain distance. Everybody had a chance to weigh in, and went before the council. It was very, very public. The petition is intended at least to communicate that to large percentages of this community, just in a matter of days, it doesn't feel that way. I would have never purchased a piece of property, ever, certainly not at that value, with what's proposed to be there. So I think the discussion of easement rights and easement consideration is important, not just for, I think Mr. Hendricks, you talked about, do they have those rights yet? The petitioner said tonight, well, we're not going to put effort into those rights until you give us the project. well, who's the petitioner? The petitioner here is Rocky Mountain Power, a for-profit entity in business to generate power and to make money. I would assume that a for-profit entity would have the requirement to fulfill the legal requirements to demonstrate that they can proceed with the project or not before they're given permission. Back to my property. I think Bank explained it well. I would only build on it this way. The conditions, I think, that are imposed should be related somehow to the cost and impact of the project. I would submit that the impact of this project on our beautiful valley is pretty substantial. It's enormous. In 1970, when those easements were granted, I don't think anybody envisioned how many houses, a school, churches, sensitive land would be under what's up here to be proposed. So I think cost should potentially be considered in relative terms, right, to the negative impact of project. Jason, my wife, and I had a conversation about 5 weeks ago where we asked, what would the cost be? In that conversation 5 weeks ago, of varying lines, Jason said about 10 times. 2014, it's 2017. 5 weeks ago, from the petitioner, about 10 times. As a citizen owning property, I find that to be unacceptable, and I do find that to be irresponsible. The cost that's going to be enacted on this valley, I guess what we're asking, there are 1,800 of us, I don't think it's too much. They say they need 2 years to complete this. We're going to run into power issues in 2021, 2022. What about 12 months of extensive study? Rocky Mountain Power evidently wants to have a high voltage line pretty bad across these existing easements. Right? For that capability to generate that profit across our valley that gets sold into other places, right? Summit County being one that rejected a similar proposal that would now be run across our lines, I don't think it's unreasonable to consider as a condition an extensive power study that's very descriptive and very detailed. Second, a study that outlines not, hey, it's about 10 times the cost, or it might be about 4 times the cost. But how about spending $10,000, $25,000, and benchmark 5 other cities? You spend 5 minutes on the internet, and you can find 50 examples of similar power companies burying transmission lines. How is it possible that it's good in so many locations and somehow a reasonable profitability model? I'm a capitalist. I'm fine with a company making a profit, but I think that profit should be in relation to the cost that it enacts, and you should have to play for that. So I think there's 2 or 3 specific studies that potentially could be conditions that are questions that could be answered. Just tonight we have from 3 times to 7 times. If you go on the internet, you can find examples of $500,000 a mile additional cost above ground versus burying the lines. I don't know what it costs. I'm not an engineer either. I think it's a reasonable part. So first, I think easements, do they have them as a concern? Second, this is a permanent blight across our valley. It really is. And so I think 1,800 people are saying it takes 2 years to complete. If we're going to have potential power issues in 4, 5, 6 years, let's spend 6 months and find out all their alternatives to routing. The answer that my wife and I were given in that same meeting about routing was the existing lines are our most legally defensible option. It's a quote. I don't think it's too much to ask to show the technical capability of alternate routes and the detailed cost with an objective study of alternate routes. and the same for bearing lines. In a telephone phone call with a power consulting firm in Denver, Colorado, I was quoted $10,000 to come in and look at the system and to give a rough ballpark of what it would cost, given the soil conditions, given the distance, the amount of rock to drill through, what it would cost to put this underground. Not even that has been done. So respectfully, I appreciate the time to share my concern.
Thank you, Chris. Is there any questions for Chris? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next? And we're on to the time limit now. Come up, please. State your name.
My name is Ian Harvey. I lived in this valley for 21 years. I'm not a protester type. It's the third one of these meetings I've gone to. Give you a little perspective. I work in the ski industry. Pretty much everywhere I go are beautiful mountain valleys throughout the United States. And pretty much every single one of those places I go has buried lines. Pretty much the entire Alps have buried lines. So I think Doug and Harold exhibited a lot of competence. I think we're in good hands, but in this respect, we're obviously incompetent. And it's a very easy thing to even look in the public record, in many cases, to how much these buried lines cost, how much these projects cost. We did the same thing with our school. We said, hey, we're building this big high school. How much did your guys' high school cost? How hard is that? It's just doing our due diligence. I think we're crazy to ruin the best thing about our valley, which is not our people. It's not anything but the North Fields, Timpanogos, and the beautiful view that we have in the middle of our valley. That is the core thing about Heber Valley that makes it beautiful. And we are going to ruin that simply because we don't know how much it costs to bury lines. It's crazy that we're not doing our due diligence. I have a lot of respect for you all serving and the competence that's been exhibited, and I'm a grateful resident of Heber Valley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Blake Myers, Midway resident, and amen to just what was said. And I'm going to be kind of short here and to the point, but I think that we're at a major turning point here. We have a major decision to make that is going to be something that's going to last forever. And we need to make the right decision. This is irreversible. 100-foot tall power transmission lines are ugly, and right to go right through the heart of our valley, or right through the middle of it. We need to make the right decision, and now's the time to do it. I have a feeling that if we do the wrong thing, we're going to regret it for the rest of our lives. And so are our children and grandchildren. And when the gentleman from the power company said, we don't bury transmission lines, just like flat out, we don't do it. Why don't they do it? I mean, there's not even a question. We just don't do it. We need to have a feasibility study, just like the gentleman before me said. I got it on the internet, and it took 3 or 4 hours, and within that period of time found out they do this all over the world. They bury power lines everywhere, in Europe, on the East Coast, in Switzerland, everywhere you go, they are buried. And whether the cost is 3 or 5.5 times more, we have to ask ourselves this question: is that worth it to preserve what we have here? And I think it is.
Okay, thank you, Blake. I'd like to hold clapping and stuff down until these people have got all through.
My name is Cameron Brown. I'm a resident of Heber City. Strong echo to much of what's been said tonight. As I was sitting, I noticed that under your banner that it says our vision, and there's some key phrases in there that are tying exactly right into this discussion. And that is that you want to preserve the heritage, the rural setting, and the beauty, a lot of other nice things that this valley has to offer. So I actually just have a few points. We talked about the expense tonight, and I guess we've seen a lot of growth in the valley. We've seen a lot of commercial, residential developers come into town, and I wonder, have their impact fees been adequate if we're now at this almost seemingly emergency moment in time, that we just have to do this? I don't know what the answer to that question is. It's really just a question. But here we are. Can we look forward and say, if we're going to build this, can we collect impact fees from the future to pay for this, to help pay for that, to help subsidize that cost? Tonight, the word environmentalist comes to mind, and that's kind of a nasty word in Utah. You don't want to be typically known as an environmentalist, but everybody here and everybody that's concerned about this is an environmentalist tonight. And this is a big factor in our environment, and I hope we pay attention to it and we look at every detail, we look at every feasibility option, every feasible option, and determine what the best merits are to move forward with this. That's all I have.
Thanks.